Welcome back to Hourglass Podcast, Episode 6. Today I'm going to be talking about something I've been hammering away on social media for the past week and a half or so, the 48 Laws of Power. Welcome back to Hourglass Podcast. Thank you for tuning in to Episode 6. Today I'm going to be talking in depth about a subject that I've been hammering away on social media for the past week or week and a half. It revolves around a book called The 48 Laws of Power, whose author is Robert Greene. He's also written some other very highly regarded works, The 33 Laws of War, or 33 Strategies of War, The Art of Seduction, and most notably, the one I just mentioned, 48 Laws of Power. The reason that I'm touching on this book so heavily and so deeply over the past several days, this book was one of few that was completely banned by the state prison system that I was in. I was in Maryland's DOC, and this was about 20 years ago when this book was banned. It is apparently such a threat to people in charge that they didn't want it to even be circulated among the inmate population. To put this in context, other books that would be banned, I can't even think of the title of any, but if it had to do with like martial arts training, you're not going to get any books on that, like self-defense, how to create a weapon, or any firearms magazines, books, issues of like safety when it comes to that. These items were strictly prohibited. Like, you're not going to be able to purchase a book that teaches you how to lockpick when you're locked up. I can see why they would ban that, but this one was very interesting. It caught my eye when I was reading like a prison book catalog where you could order books, etc. And in my pursuit of knowledge, while behind bars, this one popped out. I said, 48 Laws of Power looks very interesting. So I was asking around to a couple of friends. I said, you heard of this book? They said, oh, you ain't getting that. I said, why not? They said, man, it's banned. And it was the first I'd heard. So at this point, now I wanted to read it even more, because I'm thinking, okay, if they're banning it, it's got to be something that's pretty impressive. There's got to be some serious knowledge packed into this, book or whatever. And it's quite interesting because it's a very long book. Like, it's over 500 pages. It depends on the print that you get, but it's well over 500 pages. So the laws are not just rattled off, 1 through 48. They go into depth. There's a summary of each law. It'll give you like a very basic maxim or proverb, or like if you were to bottom line the issue completely, each law would be represented as, like, for example, Law 1 is never outshine the master. But there would be 10 pages approximately. Some chapters are longer, some are shorter, that go into historical explanations. They go into accounts of literature, history, psychology, etc. Like, the book is very well written. It's a very well written book. I've got to tip my hat to Robert Greene. He's a maestro of his craft. As far as a well-researched and well-structured, well-formatted, just completely well-written book, he knocks it out of the park. Before I go singing his praises too much about it, there's a lot that I take issue with within the pages. There are some things in there that are completely manipulative, entirely deceptive. There can be a lot of ways to position yourself so that you're lying to people to gain advantage, or you using unscrupulous methods to gain power and control over people. This is one of the reasons it's so controversial. I've been putting the laws out on my social media platforms. Check them out if you get the time. I'm just doing the basic reading of the summary of each one, laws 1 through 48. They're on my TikTok, they're on Instagram, they're also on my YouTube channel. And you can go check them out there, but I'm going to go over them a little bit on here today and why I like certain laws and why other ones I'm completely very, very, very nervous if I were to use them against somebody. Like, I wouldn't want to. There's certain ones I wouldn't employ the tactics and strategies because, like I said, they can almost be evil. And there's parts of this book that are, in my opinion, flat out evil. And there's other parts of the book that are very wise. So it's one of these things you have to differentiate. You have to take with a grain of salt. Like when I talked about in episode 3, the book of Enoch. I believe that there's truth and that there's also error in that book. Can you gain some truth from it? I believe so. Could you be led astray by it as well? Absolutely. And I feel the same for this book. And when I say that it's well written, I will use an analogy here that if anyone has ever seen this movie, it'll make perfect sense. Well, hopefully it will make perfect sense to you. I was a big fan of horror films for a long time. I wanted to go see the movie Hereditary when I saw the first trailer and previews for it. So this looks really good. Everyone said it was a phenomenal horror film. It was like a genre-shaping, kind of experience. So I went and I watched it in the theater, and it lived up to all the expectations. This movie was so well done that I'll never watch it again. I was completely unsettled and unnerved after having seen it. I didn't sleep properly for a couple of days, and that's no joke. Like, I was very on edge. I did not like it. If you've seen the movie, you might know what I'm talking about. There's some just very, very heavy, dark material. But as far as a horror film is billed and marketed, this thing it lived up to the hype. I'll never watch it again, though. I feel very similarly about the 48 Laws. It lives up to its reputation, but I'm also very careful about how serious I take it. I've been putting this out there, like I said, each law at a time, because I want to see people's reactions. I want to see what they think of the book. Some people that enjoy it, you can tell that there's a manipulative undertone kind of behind them. It's interesting to watch this dynamic. Other people, they just flat out say it's a terrible book. It's wrong. Everything about it is there's no redeemable qualities. So I fall somewhere in the middle. So with that being said, it was very difficult in prison to get a copy of the 48 Laws. However, some people knew that they were about to outlaw it, and this was 20 years ago. So I'm not putting anybody out there for sure. I can guarantee these copies are probably gone anyway. There's a few copies that were left. They changed the cover and tried to hide them, and for the most part, they worked. But when the copies got fewer and fewer, a few guys took it upon themselves to start handwriting certain parts, not the whole 500 pages or plus, but the laws themselves. And I guess the meatier portions of the laws, they would handwrite these into journals. And they'd have sections of them, like it would be like chapter 1 through 6 or, 7 through 15. And they'd be floating around in different places, almost like shareware. So if you wanted to read certain copies, you would have to, first of all, know that they existed. Second of all, know who to speak to. And thirdly, you'd have to have some kind of rapport for someone to give this to you, to loan this to you. It was not easy to get your hands on, but I was able to get my hands on most of the material. When I was in Housing Unit 1, I got switched from C tier to B tier when they did some rearranging, some shaking up. They just sent a bunch of people around. When I went on a B tier, I made some new friends, and these guys, there's two individuals in particular, brain fart, who I would get together with, and we would just have knowledge time. Like, we would talk about, I'd be like, hey man, you want to get together in the rec hall tonight? We're going to go do knowledge. And that's what we just called it, knowledge. It's like, yeah, no problem. So I get together. It was me and two Muslim guys, and one white, one black, and I'm the Christian guy of the bunch. So we would get together and we would discuss all kinds of stuff, like literature, philosophy, politics, religion, and it was always respectful. It was actually a breath of fresh air compared to the nonsense you see out there today. Like on social media, people can't talk. You can't even have an actual conversation with anybody because they're like, oh, you're this or you're that, so you're in this tribe and you're in this camp, so therefore I don't like you because I'm in this camp. And it's so frustrating to see because people can't actually have a genuine exchange of ideas without ad hominem attacks and just stupid, dumb vernacular that they bring into it. It's just ridiculous to see. It's a devolution of intelligence. These guys were fantastic. We would get together. We would talk about the Bible. We would talk about the Quran. We would talk about the Buddhist teachings. There wasn't a lot of information on that in there, but when we get our hands on it, we would pass it around, we'd talk about it, and we'd discuss. And it was wonderful. This was some of the most thought-provoking conversations I had in prison were with these two guys. And I loved them for this. It was fantastic. And a lot of people looked at us kind of funny. They're like, why is this Christian dude hanging out with these two Muslims? And they're over there talking about, Plato or whatever. And people looked at us funny. They gave us funny looks. And it's not like that's all we did. We'd work out together too and do things like that. And I was very grateful for the dynamics of the prison that I was in because we didn't have the straight race lines like you're white, you can't talk to black guys. And I know that's the case in a lot of places, a lot of institutions. I understand that. I didn't have to worry about that, which was a blessing for me because some of my best friends from prison are not white. They're the black guys. And I couldn't imagine not having these guys as friends still to this day. So besides that point, it turned a lot of heads when we would get together. We would talk about all kinds of stuff. We would get into the wisdom books. I was introduced to some. I would introduce them to, I was like, hey, Book of Proverbs in the New Testament, check that out. There's massive amounts of wisdom. I read that book. I read a chapter of Proverbs every day for 5 years. And I learned an incredible amount of wisdom and practical application. Wisdom really is just knowledge manifested. So it's knowledge in action. And it's a phenomenal book if you've never checked it out. It saved me a lot of problems because I've seen things and avoided them because of it. Also, we would get into the philosophers. You got stuff like Plato. A lot of glare on there. Small books, but they're power-packed with wisdom. I mean, these guys were the original thinkers. The Apocrypha has some amazing wisdom in there. There's the Wisdom of Solomon, which is it's non-biblical, but it's very powerful. Some good stuff. The book of Sirach is in there. That's where I learned the quote, which this is one of my favorites after reading it. It says, the mind of the fool is in his mouth. The mouth of the wise is in his mind. And that's powerful stuff right there. But one of my absolute favorite books that these guys showed me, and I've got a couple copies of it. So it's a very short read. It's like 30 pages or something. It's not long. As a Man Thinketh by James Allen is one of the premier practical wisdom handbooks that I've found. So these are things that we would read. We would get together and discuss, and I learned a lot with these guys. And I'd like to believe I taught them some things as well. We all brought something different to the conversation. So one of these gentlemen had 48 laws, and I would check those out when he would allow me to look at them because he was very hesitant to come off them too. We were 2 cells down from each other. I was in 12 and he was down at the end, and he was like, man, look, I want this back tomorrow. So I'd be up all night just reading it, just going over it. I'm like, all right. But there's a lot of things in there that gave me cause for concern. So I'm going to just go through a few of these rapidly and talk about whether I think they're good and bad, or good or bad, or neither. There's you got to take each thing and judge. You got to judge each one independently. You can't say this whole book is trash or this whole book is phenomenal. There's going to be good and bad in things. And I politically stand in that category. I've been a registered independent for several years. And I know that I'm an independent when liberals call me a conservative and conservatives call me a liberal. So I'm like, hey, listen, buddy, I talk about the actual issue on the table. And if that particular issue you think puts me in this camp, and I confuse people all the time. They don't know what to think because I'll talk about the issue at hand. That's what it comes down to. That's where critical thinking, logical rationale, and just putting your mind to an issue instead of a tribal camp. Like, oh man, these people say this, and I've always voted this way, therefore I have to believe this thing. Don't be stupid. Make your own mind up on each issue, and that's what I've done with this book here. So, all right, so I've written a little bit on this, and I'm going to just go right into it. Law 1, never outshine the master. I believe that's good and bad. It can be good in certain ways where you don't want to rock the boat and have yourself targeted because you might be doing something that makes someone in a position of authority have contempt for you or not trust you because they're afraid that you're going to take their position. So it's good in that way. It can be bad in the aspect that you might hold back and not give your best to a situation. So you see what I'm saying? This is what I'm doing with this logic here. There's good and bad with some of these. And go to Law 3, conceal your intentions. That's also, in my opinion, a good thing and a bad thing. You don't want everyone to know what you're doing all the time, but you don't want to be so shady that you look like you're hiding something. So there's middle grounds. There's a lot of gray in life. There really is. There are definite absolutes, but there are a lot of gray areas that you have to use your gray matter to differentiate and decide which course of action is proper for each situation that comes up. All right, so Law 5, This is a good one. Law 5 says, so much depends on reputation. Guard it with your life. That is very true. Once you get a bad name, it can almost be impossible to undo that. So it's very, very difficult to clean up a tarnished reputation. So it's images and everything, but it's very careful. Be careful to have a good name. You want to carry that with you in life. Law 7. This is interesting. I think this is a bad law. Get others to do the work for you, but always take the credit. I don't like that. I don't like that one bit. It reminds me of a lot of bosses that I've had over the years. They don't do a thing, but they take all the credit for it. And you see that at many jobs, many places. People in positions who don't know what they're doing, they run around and they suck up all the glory, and then they forget about you. So I don't think that's cool. I think that's a bad law to use on other people personally. However, you might see it differently. You might see it as a good thing. I don't know. I don't know what everybody's thinking, but yeah, Law 7, get others to do the work for you, but always take the credit. I don't know about that one. That's I got to put that in the bad category. Law 9, win through your actions, never through argument. This makes sense. I like this a lot. There's, the old saying, how does it go? Don't talk about it, be about it. So you could sit here and say some stuff that doesn't mean a thing, but if you're actually exhibiting in your lifestyle and your actions what you're trying to convey, that's much more powerful. So, again, that's win through your actions, never through argument. You can't change somebody's mind by mere words. Hey, you should do this or you should do that. Sometimes when they see what you're doing, they're gonna be like, "Oh man, that's pretty interesting." They might not see what you saw, but they'll see the path that you follow once you're successful, and then they'll want to follow that. So, win through actions rather than word. I think that's a good law. Law 10, I think this is a great law. Infection. Avoid the unhappy and unlucky. I'm by no means saying to ostracize people who are of bad fortune or whatnot, but there are certain people who they are black clouds. They're constantly negative. They bring nothing to the table except for complaints, negativity, strife. Those are the people that I choose not to associate with. There's a proverb in the Old Testament that says, "He who walks with the wise grows wise, but a companion of fools suffers harm." I think of that when I see this one right here. Avoid the unhappy and unlucky. Sometimes people are victims of their own mentality, and you have to be very careful about who you surround yourself with. Just because someone's going through something bad doesn't mean you should avoid them, because we're all going to have tough times and go through things. So a lot of these laws they can be argued either way, but in my opinion, I put that as a good law. What do I got here? Law 11, learn to keep people dependent on you. I think that's bad. I think that's very bad. I don't enjoy that, because then you're basically creating people who don't have the ability to take care of themselves or fend for themselves. I personally would rather see everyone else equipped to do well, not to be dependent on the one who's doing well. That to me is extraordinarily manipulative. I don't agree with it. I'm against that one. Law 11, my book, no good. Law 12, use selective honesty and generosity to disarm your victim. I think that's bad, because right there, you're talking about a victim. Victimizing people is not cool. I don't believe in that. I don't think it's a good thing. And it's probably a bit ironic me saying this, talking on a prison channel, because I got 21 years for robbing people. And so I was victimizing people. So actually, that might give me more of a stance to say, don't do it. It's not good. I've been down that road. You don't want to create victims. It's just not a way to live. It's not good. The lying aspect behind it, use selective honesty, that's just a lie. And generosity, to disarm your victim. I think, see, right there, this is one of the laws that people are going to point to and say this book is bad. So, my opinion. It's bad. A lot of lying used. Not good. Law 14. Law 14 states, pose as a friend, work as a spy. It's very deceptive. It's very dangerous. It's very fraudulent and phony to pose as someone's friend just to gather information that you can use against them. That creates trust issues throughout the planet. When people act like that, no one trusts another person. If there's no trust, then there's a general decline in community. And when you start to have that happen, it's every man for himself. And these things can have a way of snowballing into a negative way. I don't like that one. I don't like that one at all. Law 15, crush your enemy totally. Interesting, because when he talks about this, he talks about how Moses even knew to crush your enemy totally. I think this law depends. Sometimes you need to stop an adversary. Sometimes you need to destroy them. So it really does depend. There's certain people that, in my opinion, and this is just me saying this, there are certain evil individuals in this world that I have met that if they were to stop breathing, I wouldn't skip a beat, because it's like, you know what? that person is nothing but bad and dangerous and trouble, and they want to harm people. So, yeah, Law 15, crush your enemy totally. Sometimes people just need enough of a come to Jesus moment where they're not completely crushed, but they can learn from their mistakes. Like, for instance, myself, I was given the 21 years, and I was 5 years into it before I started to attempt to get some time back. And they could have given me much more time. They could have given me less. They could have crushed me totally, and I could still be in prison to this day. But I learned my lesson through it. So there is a redeemable factor for some people. Not everybody needs to be crushed totally. I think that depends on the situation. Law 17 says, keep others in suspended terror. Cultivate an air of unpredictability. Bad. It's a bad law. I don't want to keep people in terror. That's it's very dangerous. When you have someone who's scared of you, a scared person will react differently than someone who just knows your boundaries. So if you keep somebody in suspended terror, that means that you're living inside of their head and they're worried about you. They might be very fearful. I mean, that's what that implies. A fearful aspect that is quite terrifying. A scared person will react differently than someone who is not as terrified of you. They might lash out at you, and you're putting yourself into a dangerous, very dangerous position with that one. I wouldn't do it. I put that in the bad list. Law 19, know who you're dealing with. Do not offend the wrong person. This one is very true and very good. You need to be very careful, especially if you're going to employ these laws in your psychological day-to-day. I mean, just take it back to the one where I was just saying it's a terrible idea. You don't want to offend the wrong person. So you don't want to keep certain people in suspended terror. So these laws kind of go at odds with each other, in my mind. But it's very true. Some people will hold a grudge for their entire lives. They will remember the slight that you, enacted upon them, and they might spend years coming after you, waiting for their moment. So you got to be very careful about the people that you offend. This is very true. I think this is one of the better laws, in my opinion. Law 21. Play a sucker to catch a sucker. Seem dumber than your mark. Bad. I don't like that. When you're talking about somebody's your mark, that's just another victim. I'm not about the victimization. I'm not about... That's just not my thing, man. Not a good one. Bad law. 24. Play the perfect courtier. Now, this is interesting because I'm not going to completely weigh in on this one, whether I think it's good or bad. I'm going to say that it sounds and reminds me very much of Game of Thrones. When you're playing the perfect courtier, you think of like Varys in Game of Thrones, the fat bald dude. He was the perfect courtier. This guy did his thing. And then you had like Littlefinger. He did okay. He did pretty well, but these guys were both courtiers. So think of that and think of how they both ended up. Yeah. If you haven't seen the show, then forget it. All right. Law 25, recreate yourself. I absolutely love that. I think that just lines up with natural law in so many ways. When you think about a deer, many times they'll shed their antlers, and when they fall off, new ones grow in. And then they have stronger, larger antlers through each recreation, through each iteration. Snakes, which I hate to use this, but they shed their skin, and they have to do that. So they'll recreate themselves. My favorite recreate analogy would have to be the eagle. From what I understand, Once eagles get to a certain age, they have the option where basically they can go through a very painful process of recreation, or they'll die. And the process is, I think, like several months long. Like they have to pluck all their feathers, which is, it's very painful for them to get all of them off. And this was the part that really stuck out to me the most. The eagle has to smash its beak into a rock repeatedly until it's destroyed. And then they have to let it grow back into place. So this like molting and regrowth process is very painful, but they recreate themselves and then they're stronger than they were and they continue to live. And this doesn't apply for everything, but I very much enjoy that law. I think it's a good one. Recreate yourself as long as you're advancing. Not all recreation is good. Some people can reinvent themselves in a very bad way. They can go backwards. But if you're striving to do better and trying to attain positivity and just a higher outlook, I would say it's a great law. 25. Law 27 says, play on people's need to believe to create a cult-like following. Bad. That's not good. Every time you see these cult-like followings, bad things happen. So again, you're employing people to be your pawns, to go out and do your dirty work, and to make you, king of the castle. Like Borat. And it's just, I think it's a very bad one. I don't like culty stuff. I'm not into that. It's very dangerous, and the way that Robert Greene describes it, it just makes me think that I'm like, man, some people are going to run with that, and that's not good. And you're going to see, you could see a trail of destruction possibly in the path of someone who's using that law. Law 28. I'm not reading all these laws. I'm skipping through them. I think I'm doing about half of them, just kind of touching over them. And again, if you want to see them all, I've got them on my social medias, each one, law 1 through 48. I've been posting them. They're all there to find. Very easily accessible. Lockup Legends and Lessons. Law 28. Enter action with boldness. I love this. If you're going to go after something, go after it. That's what he's saying. And of course, he'll give you all the historical application that comes along with this if you read the book. But that's, in my opinion, that's a great law. Law 28. Enter action with boldness. Don't do something halfway. If you're going to go after it, charge it hard. Law 29. Plan all the way to the end. That makes sense. I mean, that's just life chess right there. Good law. Where are we up to? Only got a couple left here, so it's not going to be much longer. Law 33. Discover each man's thumbscrew. I believe this is very exploitative. It's not a bad thing per se, to understand your enemy's weaknesses. It can be if you're going to use them in a way that's unjust. So it's not a bad thing. Like, equate it to computer hackers. You have white hats, which are people who do ethical hacking. You have gray hats who do, there's a mix of good and bad, and you have your black hats who are trying to steal your information so that they can use it for their purposes, usually monetary gain or something along those lines. But ethical hacking is actually, they just call it penetration testing, and this is something that's done in the computer world. So it's not bad to learn weaknesses if you're using that to shore up your defenses, but if you're using it for ulterior motives, then I believe that's bad. Excuse me. So you have to take that one with the situation of who is wielding the use of that law. All right. Excuse me. Law 35. Master the art of timing. I think this is a great law. It's very self-explanatory. Master the art of timing. You can say the right thing at the wrong time and it won't be received. Or you can say You can say nothing at the right time and miss your window. So timing, very important. If you're going on a date with somebody, you don't try to kiss them at the beginning of it. You probably would wait till the end of the night to see if it went well or not. So it's timing. It's very simple. It's not super complicated. Good law. Law 40, despise the free lunch. Now this one's good and bad, in my opinion. I'm very careful to accept things from people if I think that there's an ulterior motive behind it. If I think somebody's like, here, hey, have this thing, or oh, let me buy this lunch for you, or let me take you out, let me do something nice for you. If it's someone who's genuinely trying to help you from a good place, that's okay. And it's still hard for me to accept things from people. I'm just a man, and that's how we are. A lot of times we don't want to accept help from people. We're going to pull ourselves up from the bootstraps and go out and do the hard thing, and no matter how hard it is. But this one can be good and bad. Some people can be tricked into the free lunch, and then they're in somebody's pocket. It's the free lunch. It's not necessarily, here, let's get a grilled cheese. It could be whatever gift or free thing that has been given to you. So this is a good and a bad law. It really depends on who's offering. If it's someone who's a good person, then you can trust their motives. If it's someone who's not, I'd be careful, and I would despise the free lunch in that case. All right. Law 42. This one's interesting. It says, strike the shepherd and the sheep will scatter. Now that is biblical, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's a good thing. Jesus talked about that in the New Testament. Strike the shepherd and the sheep will scatter. It wasn't really necessarily a great thing for someone to go and attack Jesus. I mean, you're going to have to deal with God one day about that. So you got to be careful in employing these laws. But the principle itself makes sense if you're in a military application. You take out a general, and there could be mass confusion among the troops. If you take out certain points of infrastructure with whatever enemy you're dealing with, that can scatter everyone else. So again, use your judgment. Good, bad, I don't know. Just because it's from the Bible doesn't mean it's a great thing, because there's a lot of things in the Bible they talk about which are warning signs as well. So anyway, a lot of people see that and be like, oh, it's in the Bible, it's good. Not necessarily. Be careful how you use these particular points of knowledge. Law 44, disarm and infuriate with the mirror effect. Now, I like this one because it reminds me of two of my absolute favorite proverbs in the Old Testament. It comes from Proverbs chapter 26, verse 4 and 5, and these are really good. Hear this, and then you're going to see the wisdom. The way that he writes these two together, Solomon, it's incredible. Verse 4, do not answer a fool according to his folly, lest you be like him. Immediately followed by verse 5, answer a fool according to his folly, lest he be wise in his own eyes. Now that is extraordinarily wise right there. Don't answer a fool according to his folly, lest you be like him. Answer a fool according to his folly, lest he be wise in his own eyes. That is the mirror effect broken down to its base level. When you answer a fool according to his folly, you bring yourself down to someone's position that they're in. I get that. And then immediately after, answer a fool according to his folly, lest he be wise in his own eyes. That's when you're showing them the ridiculous nature of how they're talking stupid. And if you talk to them in the same manner, they might be like, oh, that's ridiculous. So that's a good one. It's something that circulates through my mind quite often. It's a very, very powerful set of proverbs right there. And if you read Law 44 and get into it, it's a good one. I enjoy that one. I think it's very interesting. And rounded out, Law 48, assume formlessness. Now, I really like that because it allows you to not put yourself in a box. When you assume formlessness, you're adaptable to situations and scenarios at hand, which is a very, very powerful tool to have in your arsenal. That is a skill. If you have that in your quiver, you can succeed. I've heard it said before, Darwin's old law was, the survival of the fittest. And I heard later on that it had been amended over time. I don't know who to attribute this to, but it kind of went from survival of the fittest to survival of the most adaptable. For example, thousands of years ago, there was a giant species of wolf. It was a very huge, powerful, like apex predator, and it ruled everything. But after certain conditions happened on the planet, I don't know what it was, that took this particular species out. But the gray wolf, which was kind of like, it was a victim to this larger apex predator, and it wasn't like a very powerful wolf, but it survived because it was more adaptable. Now, you might be the biggest, toughest thing in a room, but if you're not adaptable, then you might not have longevity on your side. So I don't want to keep going too long. That's Law 48, assume formlessness. I think it's fantastic. But again, if I have to sum up my thoughts on this book entirely, I will equate it to the similarity of being like the concept of firearms. In the right hand, they can do a lot of good. They can defend people. They can protect you. They keep you safe. Same thing with the laws. In the wrong hands, they can easily hurt you, and the consequences may be deadly. Keep that in mind. It's not the laws themselves, it's the person who's wielding them. I'm not a huge fan of using these laws. I actually hated this book when I first read it. Like, there was just so much manipulation and deception that jumped off the pages that it very much bothered me. Having gone through it again and again and seeing what's in the pages, it's given me a defensive posture to be able to notice when someone is trying to use manipulation and employ these tactics against me. Or if I see them using it against another person, I can very easily tell what kind of individual I'm dealing with. If I watch them prey on the weak, then I know who I'm dealing with right then. And then usually people that prey on the weak, they, not since prison, have a lot of people tried to psychologically manipulate me, because I put myself in a position where that's difficult to execute. I'm not saying I'm the smartest guy in the room, but I am saying that I'm aware of a lot of these tactics, and it gives me an understanding of how to read a room. So people that use these tactics, you have to be wary of them. But if you don't know what they are, then you're going to be in the dark. So it all comes down to knowing your enemy. And if you don't know who they are, then you don't know how to defend yourself against them. But be careful. These laws can be very dangerous, and they can backfire upon you if you use them wrong. And I would exercise caution if you're to read this book. So anyway, this was a long one. This is a long episode. Thanks for sticking around. Like I said, you can go check them out on my page if you want to. All 48 laws they're up. I've been putting them up for the last few days. So you can check them out there. Just order the book for yourself if you want to. It's Robert Greene, The 48 Laws of Power. And again, it's good knowledge to have, but it's also you're playing with fire. So keep that in mind. Thanks for sticking around to the end. And as always, the wise man doesn't get himself into what the smart man has to get himself out of.